Kimchi, Soju, Buldak, Mukbang, that is, words that anyone interested in Korean culture has probably heard of before. These are also some of the Korean terms that made an increased appearance on global media platforms last year. This, according to data recently released by Korea's Culture Ministry in its annual Global Hallyu Trends Analysis. Let's delve deeper into the findings of the trending K-key words with David Tizzard, Professor of Korean Studies at Seoul Women's University and Hanyang University, who is joining us online today. Hello, Professor Tizzard.
Hello, Professor.
Good afternoon. It's great to see you both, and thank you for saying K-key words so I don't have to, because that sounds difficult.
I know. We're talking about many words today, but that was a mouthful. Well, Professor Tizzard, let's talk about this Global Hallyu Trends Analysis, which for its latest report looked at some 680,000 pieces of data from October 2023 to September 2024, based on foreign news articles, social media discussions, and more. So, what were the top Hallyu keywords?
Yeah, so this is a very immense study that's taken place, and it just reaffirms that what we already know, that Korean culture is popular around the world, and that's what the word Hallyu means. It means the Korean wave. It means products, culture, words, ideas that originate in Korea and then spread overseas. So that's the wave aspect of it. We know it's so popular because we can see it, and there's even now a ministry that studies and promotes these things. Now, this culture moves so quickly. So as you said, this study that was done took place a little while ago. So when we see some of the words come up, words like BTS and Blackpink, that was very big in Asia and Europe. That sort of confirms the strong fan base and the media coverage that these groups were getting. If you look at North America and the United Kingdom, the big words and the trends that from the data in those regions, it's very interesting. It was keywords like Kimchi, Buldak, and Mukbang were trending. And these point to more culinary interest, and there's sort of food programs and Netflix documentaries that go along with those. Turkey and China, those had a high percentage of K-dramas, K-movies. And then when you get into Southeast Asia, when you get into India, Thailand, the Philippines, these regions, it was really K-pop that was the most discussed. And what this data did, it really reaffirmed what other data has shown us, that when we look at sort of these K-pop huge numbers that they get online, yes, K-pop is very popular in the West, and we have all these media reports about K-pop breaking the West, but sometimes we're very quick to ignore just about where K-pop is popular, and we sort of neglect the true origin. And a lot of the data shows that in the Philippines, in Indonesia, in India, and Thailand, K-pop is so incredibly popular. Just one last point on this, based on my own experience back in the United Kingdom during January and February, I spent 5 weeks there. K-food is everywhere. It's in the streets. There's Korean restaurants, there's Korean supermarkets, there's bunshik or street food available. And amongst my demographic of people in their 30s or 40s, they're more likely to have eaten Korean food than perhaps to have seen a K-drama or a K-pop. So Hallyu is still spreading. It's spreading at an immense speed, but it's spreading differently to different parts of the world.
It's very interesting to see how these key words differ by country and continent, and also even by generation.
I definitely agree. And Professor, you may have already kind of answered my question, but what do you think is the biggest force behind Korean words or cultural aspects becoming so widely used abroad? Now, like you said, that K-pop is one of the biggest forces behind it.
Yeah, that's undeniable. Whether K-pop is still a thing or not remains to be seen. I find more and more of my students say they used to be K-pop fans. Of course, it's still very popular. And last week I wrote a column in the newspaper arguing or discussing whether Jennie, with her Dochi collabs and things like that, whether that's still K-pop or not. Many people are inclined to say it feels just more like pop music. What's driving this emergence of Korean words around the world? It's that Korean culture, but it's also social media and streaming platforms. It's this big focus on looking around the world for something unique, something, and I hesitate to use this word, exotic or something different. What's really helped that over the last, let's say, half a decade or so know is that Netflix and other streaming platforms, now they have incredible subtitles. If you went back 10 or 20 years and tried to access Korean content abroad, it wasn't just the difficulty in accessing these things. It was that when you did, you often came across subtitles that felt a bit sort of archaic, or they didn't really convey what was going on. Now we have sort of TCKs, we have people of mixed heritage, we have people that understand multiple cultures, and streaming platforms and even sort of personal translation sites and websites are really being able to communicate Korean culture authentically or in a way that resonates with the rest of the world. So I think it's not just Korean culture itself, but the way we've been able to communicate that through subtitles, through language, through sort of localization to local markets. And I think that's been super important.
Now, Professor Tizzard, we're now going to go a little deeper into these actual Korean words. Now, I can explain to a foreigner by now what kimchi is, or mukbang, or oppa, or hanbok. But there are some words that really can only be fully understood in Korean and are really difficult to translate. So what are some of those?
Some of the words that are really difficult to translate from my personal perspective that are not necessarily in this data report, you might find taptape, you might find yoyu, which you hear all the time, even something like sonsengnim, which means teacher. But it doesn't always mean teacher. So some of the hardest words to translate in Korean culture, I find, is not a word like nunchi, because that might be emotional intelligence. It's not maybe a word like jong, which sometimes just mean a bond between two people. Sometimes for me, the hardest words to translate are what we call hoching, or titles. So in Korean culture, if somebody is a little bit older than you, you might call them hyung or nuna or songsaengnim, these kind of things. And this is really hard to translate because it's not linguistic, it's culture. So if somebody says to you in Korea, oh, I met my sister yesterday, you have to stop and think, is that your real sister or a sister? Like, these are some things that are really difficult to get across. And what's so interesting is that when people overseas watch K-dramas, when they watch, you know, IU on Jeju Island and things like this, and the latest series of Squid Game, what they'll see in the subtitles is often, particularly in English, they'll see the names of characters rather than the hoching or the titles through which they're addressing to each other in Korean. And so you're not getting some of that cultural relationship, which is heavily implied in the original language. Now, some fans of Korean culture, they want the authenticity. They want the subtitles to say hyung, oppa, nuna, 동생, these kind of things. But if you put that to people that don't really know Korean culture, they're going to be taken aback and say, why is this guy's name oppa? What does that mean? And so that's really where the translation issue comes in, because it's not linguistic so much, it's cultural. If I can, I'll say one point really quickly, that some of the words that are making the dictionary and being used, such as like 애교 and oppa, they're words that are actually going out of fashion in Korean culture itself. Sort of the 애교 and the oppa culture is being heavily discussed by sort of 20-something Koreans, and yet they're the words being included in the overseas push. That's quite interesting to me.
It is. And you just mentioned that really hoching is really difficult to explain to people. For instance, Walter and I are the same age. We're not going to reveal how old we are, but that means we are 친구. Even if we might not be friends, real close friends, we would say 친구 because we're the same age.
We're not close friends?
We are, of course. It's an example. But then again, for instance, if I might have been working longer than Walter here at Arirang TV, then I could be a 선배. I could be someone like a senior, even though I'm the same age. So these are really difficult to translate, especially as you mentioned in subtitles. That was a great point. Now, Professor Tizzard, what would be, if you do have one or two, your favorite Korean word?
My favorite Korean words. It's a very great question. I love sabasa, which is a new one which refers to person by person. It comes from kebaka. But this reflects the growing individualism in Korean. Sabasa, you do you, I'll do me. Don't yuck someone's yum. So I love that. Sometimes I say mun ba mun, munwa by munwa, and my Korean students look at me and say, you can't say that, Professor. But I just did. I like 폼 미쳤다, which means you're crushing it. 폼 미쳤다, your form is crazy. These days, because of the weather, 삼한사온. And then the best Korean expression that I love so much is 산 넘어 산. Over the mountains, there are mountains, which is literally true in Korea. But it also means if you get through something in your life, guess what? Something else is coming as well.
Wow, maybe some of those were even. Did you know all of these, Walter?
Yeah, I actually have used a lot of them as well.
And you also earlier mentioned, Walter, one of the words that you really like to say in Korean but are really difficult to translate is?
Yes, like especially when you're eating food, 고소하다, right? It's extremely hard to, especially in Korean food, it's used so much, but we can't actually translate that in English, but in Korean, it's used so much to describe a taste, but you could never really like express it in English.
You would kind of say nutty flavor.
Yeah, and like a nutty flavor,
really
but
nutty.
it's not nutty. It's just crazy.
Right.
So yeah, it's a very hard thing to translate.
It is.
So anyway, have you ever encountered any K-pop fandom slang or newly created Korean words that surprised you, and how are they spreading globally? For example, like I can think of the word bias. That's something that I hear quite often when it comes to global slang.
Yep, there are some words like that, and I've seen reports that say, you know, these Korean words are going into the international arena. Words like bias, words like stan, words like debut and come back, and I think to myself, they're English. Like, they're not necessarily Korean, and they can be immediately understood by someone. So I don't think they're too difficult, but words like 막내, for example, the youngest member of a group, the cutest member, words like 대박, these are words that you wouldn't know when you first saw them. You'd have to get them through context. 대박 would be, you know, something amazing or wow, but also just shorter expressions, such as like 아이고, 엄마, or even just using in the comment section, which I think more and more international people are doing when they tune in and they watch or listen to Arirang television and radio. They might be in the comment section and they might put rather than LOL or things like this. So this is where I see real genuine use of the language online. It's in these sort of expressions and emoticons and the way we reveal feelings to other people. It's not just always these deep philosophical and culinary words.
And last but not least, Professor Tizzard, what do you think would be the next Korean words that could be trending in the next report for these year's words? And also just very quickly, what are the criteria for Korean words making it into English dictionaries like Oxford? Is it that frequency, or for example, through these reports?
Yeah, if I can go with the second question very quickly first. What is the criteria for getting these Korean words into it? A lot of it is consultation with experts and then the usage. So sometimes these experts, they're kind of elderly people and they're professors, and this is not to degenerate them or to talk bad about them, but obviously they're a bit older. And sometimes when I see this list of words being added, I feel like this is like 5-10 years out of date sometimes. And so it is through consultation with experts. And then there's another thing on the spelling of words. Sometimes when you see these words that have gone into the English dictionary or the Oxford Dictionary, if you saw it and you tried to pronounce it phonetically, you would get nowhere near close to how you're meant to pronounce it in Korean. And so, for example, I've heard you, when you say Kimchi or Seoul, you immediately go into that Korean pronunciation, which is super important. So that's how they go in. What words will come in next year? I'll be very quick. Maybe Keomryong, martial law, that might be one that has to go in, I say that. But I would like to see Soju or maybe Mukbang, because most Korean young people, they're going to fortune tellers. They're doing this online Soju or things like this. And also the word Mukbang, the word shaman in English doesn't really describe a Mukbang correctly. A lot of people are sort of taking umbrage with that usage. So maybe something political, or then maybe something that involves these young people's daily lives, such as fortune telling and that kind of thing. I don't know what you think about those ideas.
Oh, I think there are some very interesting ideas. Well, thank you very much, Professor Tizzard, for your insights today. Our talk with you today was 대박, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Professor.
See you next time, guys. Thank you very much.